I'd like to formally welcome everyone to this open information session for the Yenching Academy at Peking University with a specific focus on the literature and culture research track. So the way today's presentation will go is I'll give you a detailed overview of YCA's programs, extracurricular activities, and application process. And then we're going to hear from a current Yenching scholar. Unfortunately, this Yenching scholar, who is in her second year, is currently teaching a course, I believe in the School of Art at Peking University, so she can't join us live. However, she has prepared a presentation and recorded a video, so we'll be playing her video after my presentation wraps up. If at any point during this presentation you have any questions, please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A function in Zoom. Some questions, if they can be easily and quickly answered, will be answered via text by Yenching Academy Admissions staff. Other questions I'll address at the end of my presentation and at the end of the presentation from Joyce Feng, 7th cohorter Yenching scholar. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Brent Haas. I'm Associate Dean and Director of Admission Affairs at the Yenching Academy at Peking University. If you can't tell from my accent yet, I am American. Grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. Did my undergraduate work at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., where I majored in history and minored in Chinese language. My MA and PhD in East Asian history is from the University of California, San Diego, where I focused on modern Chinese history, basically 19th and early 20th century Chinese history. I personally have been an international student in China a couple of decades ago. I studied at 2 intensive Chinese language programs, Princeton and Beijing in the summer of 1999, and IUP, the Inter-University Program for Chinese Language Studies at Tsinghua University in the 2002 to 2003 academic year. Before coming to Yenching Academy 2 years ago, I was running study abroad programs for American universities in mainland China, including Duke University, the University of California Education Abroad System, which is the centralized study abroad program for all 10 of the University of California campuses. And then I returned to IUP, this time as resident director for 4 years, directly before I joined the Yenching Academy. So that's a little bit about my personal and professional history relating to China. Peking University's history began over 120 years ago in an ultimately unsuccessful reform movement in 1898 known as the 100 Days of Reform, led by the second to last emperor of the Qing dynasty, the Guangxu Emperor. Although this reform program was ultimately unsuccessful, one of the lasting legacies of this movement was the founding of the Jingshi Daxuetang, the previous name of what became Peking University. Here are some of the lovely shots of PKU's campus. I would say that probably the central upper photo and the far right photo is most representative of the way PKU looks today, as we are in autumn and it's starting to get cold here in Beijing. We might even be getting snow a little bit later this weekend and early next week. So hopefully we'll get to see a lovely shot of Weiming Lake, Weiminghu, like you can see here in the upper portion of this slide. In the bottom left, this is Peking University's library. The library has just completed a multi-year renovation. And for many students, both undergraduate and graduate students, the library is sort of the nerve center of the PKU academic experience. This here is Jingyuan, the Jingyuan courtyard area. It is an important and lovely and historically significant location on PKU's campus. For the Yenching Academy, this is where we have our administration building, our teaching building, as well as the large multimedia lecture hall. We're clustered along the southern edge of the Jingyuan grassy area. Jingyuan is historically significant for many reasons at PKU, one of which is that this was a major portion of an earlier university that was here on our campus from 1916 until 1952, Yenching University. Yenching University was an American-run Christian liberal arts college that at the time in the early 20th century was focused on bringing the best practices of liberal arts education to what at the time was still a Chinese education system, higher education system in the very early stages of its development. Although Yenching University and the Yenching Academy of Peking University share a name and we share some of the same buildings, there never was any direct administrative relationship between Yenching University and the Yenching Academy of Peking University. But Yenching University closed in 1952, and some of its faculty was folded into Peking University, as well as Tsinghua University. Peking University moved from its older campus, which was down closer to the center of the city, a little bit northeast of the Forbidden City, up to the spot that we now know today as Peking University's campus. So Jingyuan is a beautiful, culturally and historically significant place to study, to live, and for myself and my colleagues at Yenching Academy to work. Peking University today is China's oldest and most reputable institution of higher education. We have over 11,600 faculty members that are divided into 51 different schools, departments, and institutes around campus. These faculty, along with the dedicated staff of Peking University, serve over 46,000 full-time students, as well as COVID travel restrictions pending, over roughly 4,400 international students. The Yenching Academy of Peking University is a fully funded 2-year master's program in China studies. We focus on contemporary China, but we certainly explore China's deep past, its historical and cultural traditions, its government system, its economy, society, and the ways in which reform and development over the last 4 decades or so has changed China internally, as well as the results of those reforms has changed China's place in the world. Having run the admission system now for several years and gotten to know many, many current and former Yenching scholars, I can 100% attest to the fact that we do attract truly outstanding young scholars and future leaders to the program. Pretty much every Yenching scholar will tell you that one of the best, if not the best part of the program was the colleagues and classmates with whom they got to live, study, and collaborate. We're also a part of a really interesting process of defining what China studies as an academic discipline means when you're in China, because this is a fairly new area of academic inquiry for the academic community in the PRC. We're also bringing interdisciplinary teaching methods and interdisciplinary research methods into the now well-developed system of graduate education in China. And finally, when you have a truly multicultural, multinational, diverse student body, all with a shared interest in China, taking classes together, reading some of the same materials, fascinated by some of the same topics and problems, it really does stimulate a kind of cross-cultural and international dialogue. Sometimes it's challenging, it's always rewarding. So even though a catalyst for international dialogue might sound like we're laying it on a little thick with that bullet point, it actually is very true. We take the form of a residential college. So that means in your first year at the Yenching Academy, all Yenching scholars are required to live on campus in the dormitory specifically for Yenching scholars. For scholars from mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, they're required to be in Beijing for both of the 2 years of the Yenching Academy Master's Program. International scholars have the option to not be based in Beijing or in China for their second year. However, I strongly encourage all international scholars to plan on being in Beijing for both years of the program. If you're interested in China and you wanted to develop a level of expertise related to China, you'll quickly understand that 1 year alone in Beijing is not enough to even get to know the city very well, let alone this vast, complex, and fascinating place called China. The language of instruction and administration at the Yenching Academy is English. No prior knowledge of Chinese language, no proficiency, no fluency is required for admission to the program. Every year, we have probably about 1/3 of our students who come in with zero Chinese language background or perhaps really rudimentary Chinese. That having been said, since we are a very competitive, fully funded graduate program in China studies, if you have a high level of Chinese language proficiency, If you have taken courses in China studies, this can be a competitive advantage for you. So if that fits your academic or linguistic profile, I suggest you emphasize that in your application materials. The Yenching Academy has designed our curriculum and our oversight of student activities and organizations with an eye to encouraging and sometimes pushing Yenching scholars into the broader Peking University academic and cultural communities. So half of your coursework in your first year are required courses just for Yenching scholars. The remaining half of your course credits in the first year are elective courses. Those elective courses can be taken at the Yenching Academy, or they can be taken in English and sometimes in Chinese in other departments and schools at PKU. Similarly, if Yenching scholars want to form a club, student organization, events, and there's already a pre-existing student organization at Peking University, we encourage those scholars to not form their separate organization within the confines of YCA, rather to join the PKU student organization or the PKU student organized event. Let's talk funding, because at least in North America, finding a fully funded master's program is next to impossible. So the Yenching Academy offers a generous financial package, the Yenching Fellowship. This includes full tuition payment. That includes housing in your first year in the Yenching Academy house. In your second year, if you are based in Beijing but off campus, you can receive a housing stipend. That'll be enough to cover a private room in a shared apartment, but probably not enough to cover a single studio or one-bedroom apartment in Beijing, unless you go so far outside of the city that would be very inconvenient. We also offer a monthly stipend for all Yenching scholars. The stipend is 3,000 renminbi a month, roughly 560 US dollars, give or take, every month. In the first year, we also offer round-trip travel from your home city to and from Beijing. And we offer basic medical insurance that's specifically designed for international scholars living and studying in China. Now, this is a major investment we're making into not just individual Yenching scholars, but in the entire student body as a whole, considering that we have roughly 120 scholars in each class and 2 classes in the program each year. So we conduct an academic performance review at the end of the first year. As long as Yenching scholars in their first year coursework maintain good academic standing, such as completing the required course credits, maintaining a certain minimum GPA, not failing any of your core courses, and not seriously violating the code of conduct or the laws of the PRC. You simply apply for the second year fellowship, and if you meet those clearly defined standards, you will receive it. Therefore, you should think of Yenching Academy as a 2-year fully funded master's program, but with an academic performance review at the end of year 1. We also have many other forms of financial support. In year 1, there's support for field research, most notably the Dean's Research Grant. We also have opportunity grants. So if you're attending an academic conference, presenting a paper there, then we will help fund you for that. In year 2, we also offer teaching assistantships, research assistantships, office positions, as well as residential advisor positions. These positions are offered on a competitive basis and are a way for Yenching scholars in their second year to contribute to our community in a different way and get a little bit more money in their pocket while doing so. This is an important slide, and I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about it. These are the 6 research areas, research concentrations, research tracks, whatever you want to call them, at the Yenching Academy. This is how we've been able to define China studies and fit our special interdisciplinary method of teaching and research area into the pre-existing degree granting system and accreditation system of China's Ministry of Education. These research areas will be important to your academic experience at YCA in 4 main ways. First, when you apply, you will need to choose one of these 6 research areas in the application process. Secondly, when you choose a thesis advisor at the end of your first year, You will need to choose a thesis advisor that's within one of these research areas. And you'll notice the research areas are still quite interdisciplinary: economics and management, literature and culture, politics and international relations, etc. The third way that the research area will affect your academic experience is the way that Peking University evaluates completed master's theses. You'll have to undergo a oral defense. It's about a 30-minute oral defense with your faculty or your thesis advisor and 2 other faculty committee members selected by your thesis advisor. Once you pass the defense, there's one more important stage. This is an anonymous faculty review. Your completed or perhaps penultimate thesis draft will be submitted to 2 faculty members whose names you won't know, and they'll be drawn from the research areas. They'll be experts in the field that you're mainly focusing on in your master's thesis. And finally, when you graduate, this is what will be on your master's diploma. It will say Peking University, Master of Literature, China Studies, Literature and Culture, or Peking University, Master of History, China Studies, History and Archaeology. Now, when you apply, you need to be fairly strategic in your decision of which research area you'll choose. What I mean is that this is a graduate program at China's top university. So part of our admissions review is determining your training and your preparedness for conducting graduate study and graduate research in the research area to which you are applying. So for literature and culture, since this is the area we're focusing on in today's information session, it's helpful if you have say an East Asian languages and literatures training, or if you'd had a comparative literature training, or if perhaps you majored in anthropology, but it's not fully required, because you do not have to already have a degree in the research area to which you're applying. But you should know that we're going to be focusing on your degree, your major and minor, your academic transcript, any papers or publications you might have, any internship experience that might be related, all with an eye to assessing your preparation for graduate research in the research area to which you're applying. I am not saying that you have to be a literature major to become a literature and culture research area focused Yenching scholar. But if your undergraduate training or previous degrees at the graduate level as well are not clearly connected and not obviously connected to the research area to which you're applying, then you should anticipate we'll have some questions about that and try to address some of those concerns in your application materials. Here you can see the core curriculum for Yenching scholars over our first 7 cohorts. China in Transition 1 and 2 is a 2-semester course that looks at contemporary China through different disciplinary lenses. The first semester is a large lecture led, in which all Yenching scholars attend, combined with immediate breakout discussion sections following each lecture. China in Transition 2 groups students into smaller classes focused on field research, led by a Peking University faculty member. We think that this course is important, that all Yenching scholars have on-the-ground field research experience in their first year before they start their master's thesis research in year 2. Topics in China Studies, the lecture series, brings leading figures from academia, cultural industries, media, government, diplomacy, business, international organizations, you name it, to give Yenching scholars a lecture and discuss their own experiences in their career, their work, to give you a sense of some of the interesting work that's being done in China Studies, broadly defined. Then academic writing is a year-long lecture and seminar series taught by different PKU faculty members that give you a sort of step-by-step guidance in conceptualizing a research project, identifying secondary literature, designing your research methodology, analyzing your data, drafting your paper, etc. All international students are required to take Chinese language courses in their first year, unless that international student has successfully passed the HSK level 6. That's the highest level of the standardized test for assessing Chinese language proficiency in non-native learners. HSK 6, if you've passed that test, you can be exempt from taking our Chinese language courses. However, you still need to fulfill the same amount of academic course credits, just taking content courses, electives, either at the Yenching Academy or in other departments and schools at Peking University. And we require that at least one of those content courses be taught in Chinese. It's a great, great opportunity, but also a big challenge. Scholars from mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan were required to take a foreign language course in their first year. So not English, because English is required for admission into the program. Then you can see some of the general elective courses that Yenching scholars frequently take at the bottom. These aren't directly related to China studies or to any of the specific research areas, but they are often helpful for some Yenching scholars to better prepare themselves for their master's thesis research in year 2. But notice that when I said the research areas will affect your academic experience in the Yenching Academy in 4 ways, I did not include course selection. That's because even though these elective courses from 2021-2022 are categorized within the research areas, you are free to select any elective course at YCA or at Peking University, regardless of which research area you're in. If we restricted you to only taking courses in the research area you've chosen, that wouldn't be very interdisciplinary of us. So as long as you have a course that you're curious about or you're fascinated in, and hopefully this research course will be helpful in preparing you for your master's thesis, you're free to take that course as an elective, so no problem. And there are many of our research topics, even within literature and culture, are themselves interdisciplinary. It might be the history of Chinese literature in the 20th century. So it would make sense that you might also need to take some history courses as well as elective courses. Here's some of the courses on offer in the humanities. You've already seen some of the literature and culture courses, but here you can see some of the philosophy and religion and history and archaeology. Once again, to emphasize, you can take whatever elective courses you're interested in, and we hope whatever elective courses will help prepare you for your master's thesis. Here's a few examples of thesis topics in literature and culture in the class of 2021. So these will be 5th cohorters who started in 2019 and just graduated in 2021. So you can see looking at issues of gender representation and reality TV shows, cross-gender performance in traditional Chinese opera, political imaginaries of transnational literature, and contemporary art. So this gives you just a little bit of a sense of just how different literature and culture thesis topics can actually be. When you're at the Yenching Academy, you'll most likely have 2 different academic advisors in your 2 years here. In year 1, your advisor is called a faculty advisor. You'll select your faculty advisor after about 1 month in the program. The faculty advisor will get to know you, your developing research interests, help you select courses, and introduce you to other faculty members that are experts in fields that you are interested in. In essence, this faculty advisor is in some ways your tour guide to the broader faculty community at Peking University. But since you choose your faculty advisor within a month of joining the program, we don't think it's reasonable to require that you know who your thesis advisor will be early in your first semester here. And so at the end of your first academic year, when you submit your formal thesis proposal, you will do so in conjunction with selecting your thesis advisor for the second year. Here are some of the academic institutions, departments, and schools at Peking University from which our nearly 200 faculty advisors are drawn from. So you can see we are really deeply integrated into the faculty and academic community at Peking University. Our fall field study is a required course we have generally in the fall semester of each year, but the last 2 years, because of COVID travel restrictions, even within China, we have delayed the fall field study until the end of the spring semester. So now it's basically the mid-June field study. This is a course where we take students outside of the classroom and outside of Beijing to a different city for a very intensive week-long academic travel experience. This is a graded required course. You have assigned readings before you go, lectures and videos you have to watch. We do really interesting site visits, cultural sites of cultural significance, historical sites, visit leading industries that are representative of that region, speak to experts and professionals and academics. It's a really intense travel learning experience. For the first few years, we took our students to Xi'an, the capital of Shanxi province. For the last few years, we've been going to Chengdu, the capital of Sichuan province. COVID travel restrictions permitting, we take our students in multiple field study experiences in their elective courses, as well as in the second semester of China in Transition. Here you can see in 2019, we had 30 different student groups visiting 15 different provinces, cities, and municipalities around China as part of their experience in field research. Here you can see students in one of their elective courses doing a site visit to FAST, F-A-S-T, the world's largest radio telescope in Sichuan province. Now, if you're a Yenching scholar, if you're an international student in China, it's very easy to hop on a high-speed train and go visit Shanghai for a weekend. It's not easy, however, to go down to Guizhou province and get access to the world's largest radio telescope. These are the kinds of opportunities that are available for Yenching scholars via the connections and the doors that are opened from being a Yenching scholar and a Peking University graduate student. So we not only want to get you outside of the classroom, outside of Beijing, but also outside of the major urban centers in China. Here's a field study site visit to the outskirts of Chongqing as part of Professor Lu Yang's development of Chinese civilization, where they explored the Bashu culture, one of the regional variations of ancient Chinese culture. Professor Lu Yang, who's pictured here in the left, the center of the left photo, is a research scholar at the Department of History, as well as the director of graduate studies at the Yenching Academy. Through Our Door, or Men, this is a fascinating multimedia art and historical exhibition centered on the space, the buildings in which the Yenching Academy is housed, the Jingyuan, mainly Courtyard 4, but also Courtyard 3 and the general Jingyuan area itself. I've been emphasizing to this point the academic side of the Yenching Academy, and that's important. You should know about that. But I also want you to think about the Yenching Academy as a platform for you and a diverse group of very talented scholars from around the world to join together, to use your previous expertise in China studies, but also in other areas, both academic and professional, to get together, connect, find new ways for collaboration, and create something unique to you, to your classmates, to the Yenching Academy. Through Our Door is one such example. And we'll hear from Joyce Feng, the woman pictured in the bottom left here, second-year Yenching scholar now, who was the primary driving force in creating this multimedia historical art exhibition. Joyce came to my office in early fall of last year, of 2020, expressed her interest in doing a multimedia art exhibit using our buildings. And we'd never done anything like that. So I said, Joyce, that's a great idea. Work with some of your Yenching scholars, get us a proposal, and let's see what can happen. And this is what occurred. Very impressive multimedia exhibition that included sculpture, that included using space and light to create changing art displays, that included intense archival research, including oral histories, archival letters, reminiscences, photographs, going all the way back to the Yenching University era in the early 20th century. We'll hear more from Joyce coming up after my presentation. If you're interested, please scan this QR code in the bottom right, and you can enter our VR tour of Through Our Door. Okay, we also emphasize extracurricular leadership development, career development, and training through our colleagues in the Student Affairs Office. Pretty much every week, We have extracurricular events that bring in different leaders and fields and professional fields related to China. Here you can see a photo of a vice president from the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank speaking to Yenching scholars a couple of years ago. A few days ago, we had someone from the Asian Development Bank do an online presentation and discussion with Yenching scholars. We have leadership development courses. We have interesting events about personality tests and how they can help guide you in your career choices. These are all extracurricular activities, generally in the afternoon or evening, but it's some of the offerings that Student Affairs gives you that gives you opportunities to explore some of the ways that you can develop a career outside of academia in and or related to China. After graduation, Yenching scholars have really good success moving into further graduate education. So here you can see recent students joining mainly doctoral programs, sometimes law schools, MBA programs, masters, another master's, etc. From different fields and different top universities around the world, NYU, Beida, Princeton, Stanford, Cambridge, etc. So about 30% of our graduates go on to doctoral or other graduate study. After graduation, for students who don't want to continue their studies or move into an academic career, Yenching scholars have great success finding gainful employment in interesting fields upon graduation. Here you can see some of the multinational organizations, Chinese companies going global, multinational corporations, government service, et cetera, that Yenching scholars in the last recent cohorts have joined upon graduation. The Yenching Global Symposium is our flagship extracurricular event. It is an international China Studies conference on a different theme each year, conceptualized and organized by Yenching scholars themselves. Here you can see some of the themes through the first 4 Yenching Global Symposia. This is also a great example of the way that Yenching Academy can be a platform for scholars to realize their potential and implement some of their interests. Because the first Yenching Global Symposium was created in a similar way to the Through Our Door exhibition. Yenching scholars got together, said, hey, we'd like to do an International China Studies conference that focuses on people at the early stages of their career. They put together a proposal, came to our administration, and the administration approved it, funded it, and the Yenching Global Symposium was born. Here you can see this was originally going to be the 2020 Yenching Global Symposium, but because of the recent outbreak of COVID, we had to postpone that. And then we combined it with the 2021 online Yenching Global Symposium focused on shared renewal, recoupling East with West. Yenching scholars who are interested in YGS, they join the steering committee, elect their executive directors, determine a theme, identify VIPs and keynote speakers, put out a call for applications, and then review those thousands of applications. And then travel restrictions permitting, we fly everyone to Beijing for a long weekend of discussion, research symposia, presentations, networking. It's a really outstanding event. So now I'm going to share some general demographic data with about Yenching scholars. The next couple of slides will be all Yenching scholars through the first 7 cohorts, about 750 people from over 80 different countries and regions. You can see here we are really a multinational, very diverse student body and alumni community. Because of that, we highly value applicants who have a demonstrated interest in exploring diverse cultures and are open-minded and committed to multiculturalism. So that's something that we look for in applicants' materials. For your information, if you see a 0.5, that simply indicates that someone has dual citizenship. In the first 7 cohorts, we had scholars join Yenching Academy from over 300 different universities. The universities that have placed the highest number of Yenching scholars in the program, or highest number of graduates into YCA, are listed here on this slide. So really some of the top universities around the world, and many top universities aren't even listed on here because they had less than 9 graduates placed at YCA. The research areas at YCA over the first 7 cohorts are shown here in total number of scholars and in percentages. Literature and culture is generally the 4th most popular one. The humanities tend to get fewer applicants. We would always like more applicants in the humanities, literature and culture included, but it's important to emphasize we don't have a quota. We don't have a target for the number of students who are in different research areas at YCA. If we did, I can assure you it would be much more balanced than this. What this information represents is simply the research areas chosen by the most outstanding applicants in any given year. In 2021, the 7th cohort of Yenching scholars, we have 92 scholars from over 30 different countries and regions around the world. This is a smaller incoming class than we normally target. We look for 120 students each year, give or take. But considering the continuing uncertainty about when Yenching scholars and all international students will be able to come to China, it is regrettable but understandable that some Yenching scholars chose to withdraw their acceptance and potentially try again in upcoming admission cycles. I'll tell you a little bit more about what we know and what we don't know about when Yenching scholars can come to China coming up at the end of my presentation. Here are some of the universities around the world that place the highest number of graduates into the 7th cohort. That's the 2021 academic year of Yenching Academy. And here's the 2021 cohort, 7th cohort's research area data. Happy to see that literature and culture specifically had a lot of growth from 2020 to 2021, with 12 scholars in literature and culture, roughly 30% of the student body in 2021. Also some growth in law and society. As a historian myself, I'm just happy to see that history and archaeology isn't the least popular research area at YCA. This is helpful to see because this shows you the highest degrees attained. So in other words, the educational background of incoming scholars. The majority of Yenching scholars' highest degree is a bachelor's degree, but this is skewed a little bit. This is skewed because of the regulations in place about how we can admit scholars from mainland China. We are only allowed to admit scholars from mainland China if they did their undergraduate degree in mainland China and their university and their academic performance in their undergraduate degree qualifies them for recommendation for exemption from the National Postgraduate Admissions Examination. So it's through the system known as Tuimian. So since we are currently only able to accept PRC scholars who have Tuimian exemption from the National Postgraduate Entrance Examination System, that means that all mainland Chinese scholars are coming directly out of college. So that skews our, we have 25 to 30 every year. That somewhat skews our age younger. The average age for Yenching scholars younger, and that is a large number of students who are definitely joining us directly out of their undergraduate academic experience. I would say that for international scholars, it's probably closer to 50-50. 45-50% of Yenching scholars who are international students come right after their undergraduate academic experience, and then roughly half or so have worked for a couple of years or already have a master's degree. Okay, we are a highly competitive, fully funded China Studies graduate program in China's top university. So academic performance is essential for successful applicants into the programs. So we look for an outstanding academic record. That is not, however, all we value and all we look for in an applicant. We want to know about your life outside of the classroom. We want to know about what extracurricular activities are important to you, that you've devoted a lot of time and effort to, and that perhaps is our part of who you are as a person and who you will become as a professional. We want to know how you can contribute to our student community at YCA. So we look for leadership potential, leadership experience, community service, extracurriculars like, say, music, art, athletics. Perhaps you have your own startup company. These are things that we're all interested in hearing about in your personal statement. As I mentioned, we also emphasize and value those who have a demonstrated interest in exploring cultural diversity and a commitment to respect for different cultures. You do not have to be an East Asian languages and literatures major on your way to a doctorate in that field and a career as a researcher and a professor in East Asian languages and literatures to be admitted to the Yenching Academy. We do have students like that every year, and we welcome those students. But we also have students who, at this point in their career, have excelled in another field. Maybe it's, let's say, maybe it's climate change policy or green technology. And at this point in their academic and or professional career realize, I know my field well, but I don't know what's happening in my field of climate change policy and green technology in China. Now I need to learn what's going on in China in the areas that I'm already familiar with. We welcome scholars like that every year as well. So it is potentially an advantage to have coursework in China studies, to have previous Chinese language proficiency or experience in China. It's not a requirement, but if you have a record of interest in the study of China, you should emphasize that in your application materials. Put your best foot forward and see what happens. Just like any other graduate application or job application, you need to tell us why you're interested in the study of China, why you're interested in the Yenching Academy specifically. Why now? Why at this point in your academic or professional career do you want to make this move? Where do you think you're going to go in your career, and how can we help you achieve those goals? And finally, how you think you can contribute to our community here. So that's what I'm describing as the well-articulated rationale for why you want to come to the Yenching Academy. Why China? Why YCA? Why now? Why you? And English proficiency is required for all admittees to the Yenching Academy. If you are a native English speaker, you don't need to submit a standardized test assessing your English proficiency. If you attended a degree granting institution, bachelor's degree, master's degree taught in English, you also don't need to submit your English language test scores unless you are from mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, or Taiwan. Peking University has a hard regulation that all applicants from those areas must submit an English language test score. Okay, if you are watching with us live or on the recording and you are a citizen of the PRC, the only way that you can apply to the Yenching Academy is through the recommendation for exemption from the National Postgraduate Entrance Examination. That means you must have attended or are attending university in mainland China, and your school and your performance in your department or school, your academic ranking, etc., qualifies you for Tuimian. Unfortunately, we are currently unable to accept applicants with PRC citizenship who did their undergraduate work abroad. We have what we think is a very persuasive proposal in place under review to open up admissions for PRC citizens who did their undergraduate work abroad, and we've received positive feedback on it. However, I don't think that it's likely going to be changed during this admission cycle. So please stay tuned. I'm sorry if this is giving you bad news. If you are from Hong Kong, Macau, or Taiwan, you will apply to us in the same way that you'll see coming up next in the next slide. But in addition to that, there's also a parallel application process in the PKU application portal specifically for students from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. If that matches your background, then you need to go to our website, and look at the admissions tab to find out what kinds of details are required in the PKU application portal for Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwanese applicants. It's essentially the same information as you'll be submitting to the Yenching Academy, but just in a different format. The absolute minimum requirement for being eligible for admittance to YCA is completing your bachelor's degree by August 31st in the year in which you will be enrolling. So if you're applying or considering applying for next year, 2022, you must complete your bachelor's by the end of August 2022. Basically, you can't enter grad school unless you have already graduated from college. Okay, the application deadline for consideration to the Yenching Academy is 12 p.m. December 3rd, 2021, Friday, noon on Friday, Beijing time. If you are from a university that is YCA's partner school, then you will have an internal admissions process at your home institution. Please go to our website and look at the list of partner universities to determine if that applies to you. You apply online at yenchingacademy.pku.edu.cn. If you are from mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, or Taiwan, we will need to see a certificate of English proficiency. If you are a non-native speaker of English and did not attend a university for a degree taught in English, you will also need your certificate of English proficiency. All students will need to submit diplomas from any institution of higher education, bachelor, master, what have you, from which you have already graduated. If you are currently still enrolled and therefore haven't graduated yet, no problem. We will need to see an official certificate of enrollment, generally gotten from your university registrar. We need official transcripts from all degree programs from which you are attending or have graduated. We will need a personal statement in English, maximum of 750 words. And this personal statement is basically the formal introduction to us. Why China? Why YCA? Why Yenching Academy specifically? Why now in your career, and how you can contribute to our program. Also, we have a research component in the admissions and the application package. Last year, we called this the research proposal. This year, we're changing the title and giving a little more space, calling it the Statement of Research Interest. The Statement of Research Interest, you should think about it as the first step in a multi-year conversation that you will be having with faculty at YCA and Peking University about your developing master's thesis research topic. It does not, what you write about in the Statement of Research Interest does not have to actually be what you end up doing for your master's thesis. We want to give you a chance to explore your research and academic interests while here. However, the Statement of Research Interest must be a formal academic writing exercise written in formal academic language, engaging with secondary literature, academic literature related to the topic or field that you're interested in exploring. It should give us a sense of what topic or questions you hope to answer. It can be multiple topics if you want, and that can, but you need to balance demonstrating the breadth of your research interest with the necessity of having enough space devoted to a project so that we can see really how you're thinking about it. And it should give us a sense of the approaches or methodologies that you are interested in utilizing to explore this research topic. Bit of advice: in any graduate school application, if there is a research writing component, if they want something about a research proposal, you should always base your research proposal or your statement of research interest for Yenching Academy on secondary academic literature. We want to see your resume or CV, and we need to have 2 letters of recommendation. These letters of recommendation must be academic, and they must be from associate or full professors or the equivalent titles, say senior lecturers or professors. This is a hard regulation at Peking University that is the standard for all academic master's programs at elite universities in China. If you have someone who wants to write a letter for you, who is, say, an assistant professor or a primary investigator in a research internship you had, or a manager in a job you've had, you can have them write on your behalf. They just won't fulfill these 2 academic letters of recommendation. They must be submitted as external or as additional documents. Okay, if you have questions, please go to our website, yenchingacademy.pku.edu.cn. Look at our curriculum, look at our faculty profiles, get to know the admissions requirements, and look at the profiles of current Yenching scholars. I hope that it'll be a confidence builder for you. You'll get a sense at not only the diversity of national origin, cultural background, etc. of Yenching scholars, but the diversity of universities attended, undergraduate majors, graduate degrees, professional experiences. There is not one single profile of a student we're looking for. And therefore, there is also not one single experience at YCA that all Yenching scholars share. There are multiple ways to craft a narrative that is persuasive about why we should invite you into our program. If you have questions you can't find answers to on the website, give us an email at YCA-Admissions@pku.edu.cn. You can follow us on your standard social media sites. If you are using WeChat, you can scan the QR code to the bottom left and follow our official WeChat account. One more bit of advice in your potential application to the Yenching Academy, and honestly to any graduate program. You don't need to do this alone. Graduate application process is challenging. There's a lot of pressure. You have to put your best foot forward. You want to get it. You don't know if you will. I understand. I've been through that process myself. But too many people make the mistake of thinking that they have to do it all by themselves. I strongly recommend that you rely upon and reach out to your academic mentors at your university or your academic advisors in a previous graduate program, and also look to fellowship advisors at your university. Almost every university is going to have dedicated offices to internationally competitive fellowships. And there are professionals there whose job it is to help you craft the best application package you can. So reach out to those people, ask for help, show your academic mentors, perhaps your smart classmates, your application materials, have them look it over and give you feedback. This is always a good way to do it when you're applying to graduate school, or when, say, you're writing a paper and considering submitting it for an article for publication. All right, so finally, I want to talk about the big issue of when Yenching scholars will be able to come to China. It's now been over a year and a half since Yenching scholars, specifically international students generally, have been able to come to China. I and my colleagues at the Yenching Academy never, ever thought it would be this long. It's still very shocking to me, but this is the challenging situation that we find ourselves in. There has been no official statement about when Yenching scholars specifically and international students generally can come to China. And until there is an official statement, nothing else really matters. You'll see news about people making predictions. The head of the Center for Disease Control in China recently stated that he personally thought that once China reached 85% total vaccination rates nationwide, then it would make sense to start reopening the borders, and that according to current projections, that would probably be January of 2022. Interesting bit of evidence, interesting bit of information to file away and remember, but it's not an official policy statement, so we just don't know yet. We have been working on this problem for well over a year and a half now. In this summer, we thought we were making very good progress. We have a very detailed, well thought out proposal about when Yenching scholars should come back, how we will help get them here, how we will assist them in the quarantine process and the health inspection process outside of Beijing and inside of Beijing, where Yenching scholars are located, what their vaccination status is, what likely flight routes they'll be taking. Very detailed proposal. And this proposal has been approved by Peking University. Unfortunately, PKU is not the final decision maker in this topic. So PKU and YCA submitted our proposal to the Beijing municipal government in late July of this year. And through June and July, there was a lot of optimism and a lot of positive movement towards this. However, unfortunately, a couple of days after we submitted our proposal to the Beijing government, that's when we saw the first reported cases of the Delta variant of COVID-19 popping up in China. And although the Delta variant outbreak has not been nearly as severe in China as it has been in other places, unfortunately, around the world, China's zero tolerance policy prompted a characteristically strong policy response in China. Quarantines, limiting travel, etc. And that really put the brakes on some of the forward progress we were making earlier in the summer. Our proposal is still under review by the Beijing municipal government. These decisions in China happen behind closed doors, privately. It is certainly not the Yenching Academy is negotiating with the Beijing municipal government. It just doesn't work that way here. We're waiting for a response. We continue to follow up, but have not yet heard anything, unfortunately. After the Beijing government approves us, there will be other institutions that need to sign off on this. International students need documents from the Ministry of Education to get a student visa. So MOE will have to be involved. Visa granting power is held by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Chinese embassies and consulates all around the world will be involved. However, I personally think that once the Beijing municipal government approves, I think then that's a very, very big step because of how responsibility for policy implementation, for the success of those policy implementations and the failure of the policy implementation is granted to and is the responsibility of territorial administrative units like provinces or the Beijing municipal government. They're the ones who are responsible for what happens in Beijing, and it's made more complicated because of the fact that the central government is located here. So that's what we're doing. We're doing everything we can, and we're doing everything we should to make this happen as quickly as possible. That's what we know. Unfortunately, that's also the limit of what we know. We just don't know when Yenching scholars will be able to come to Beijing yet. I am still very hopeful that it will be sooner rather than later. Yenching scholars have mainly been online in their academic and extracurricular experiences for the last year and a half. Although we have about 40 plus Yenching scholars on campus right now, mainland Chinese scholars, scholars from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, some Korean scholars, and some international scholars who had other visas that allowed them to get into China. But the vast majority are online. And honestly, the online Yenching experience is not 100% of what Yenching scholars want and not 100% of what we want to offer them. They're missing out on being on campus, of living in the dormitory together, of exploring Beijing, of traveling in China. I get that. That's part of what everyone wants. And unfortunately, they aren't receiving that yet, but we're doing the best we can. It is still, however, very much worth applying to the program and joining our program, even if part of your time will be spent online. You will still get a world-class training in China studies and in research methodology. You'll still connect with some of the most outstanding and interesting and impressive people you'll ever know in your life, with your classmates, the other Yenching scholars. You still become a Yenching scholar, and that opens doors for you. It means something. You'll get a master's degree from Peking University, which also will open doors for you and mean something. It's not 100% of what we want to offer, And we really look forward to the time when Yenching scholars can come back here. But I strongly believe that joining the Yenching Academy, whether or not part of it is online, will definitely be a career-changing experience for you. And for many Yenching scholars, it's also a life-changing experience. Okay, with that having been said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And now we're going to listen to a video and a presentation from 6th cohort Yenching scholar, Joyce Feng. Joyce will talk for probably, I guess, 10 or 15 minutes. And then after that, I'll get to answering the questions in the Q&A section. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in. We haven't forgotten about you. We will be addressing those questions coming up soon.
Hi, I'm Joyce, a 2020 Yenching scholar. I am so happy to be here with you today. 2 years ago this time, I was in your situation and first met Brent. Perhaps 2 years later, you will be in my position and be thanking Brent. Thank you, Brent. Okay, let me start with a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Hong Kong, studied art and philosophy at Harvard for my bachelor's, won some awards, and for my extracurriculars, did for the most part research at institutions such as the Radcliffe Institute, the Harvard College Research Program, the Asia Center, and so on. I have worked and interned in multiple cities and countries, including as a designer at Home Deluxe, an e-commerce firm in Manila, the Philippines, as a model maker at Sauerbraten, an architectural firm in Berlin, Germany, and as a pitch writer at the auction house Sotheby's in Hong Kong, China. Now at Yenching Academy, I am in literature and culture, of course, specializing in Chinese contemporary art. Yenching has been very supportive about experimenting with different modes of learning. So in addition to thinking about art and words theoretically, I have also been thinking about it in action practically. As you can see from my extracurriculars, I directed and made art for Through Our Door, an exhibition I devoted my first year to and will devote the end of the sharing to. Right now, and by that I mean at this very moment, I am co-teaching a master studio seminar at the School of Architecture and Landscape of Peking University with a professor, an architect curator, and an architect. This is why I am not here with you live, but I'm sure that Brent will answer all of your questions beautifully, and perhaps the office could relay some of your questions to me and my answers to you as well. So more about Yenching and I. Why did I apply? Apart from being persuaded by persuasive Brent, I was at the time in a situation that you might relate to. As you know, Hong Kong was a British colony, so I was born into the cultures of both the East and the West. Perhaps because I am raised in and by both, by the time that I was in my 5th year in the US and Europe, I started to miss China. My body felt diasporic. I wanted to return, I wanted to come home, and my spirit felt restricted. Until then, my artistic and philosophical education had been primarily Western. As much as I love it, cherish it, and thank it, it is still one tradition or one set of traditions. So I wanted more. I wanted another set of traditions, another education to balance and counterbalance that. I wanted more freedom. I thought I could find that in Yenching. And today, I still think that I'm finding it in Yenching. As for my thesis, I am writing about the artist Xu Bing and his works. You can see his work, Book from the Sky, on the right. I am writing about him through the idea of repetition. I want to tell a story of the meaning of 7 works of his over 40 years of his creation through repetition. repetition as creation and destruction, repetition as production and consumption, repetition as white lies and black magic, and so on. Actually, Yenching invited him to speak as part of the China lecture series a year before I started, so I just missed him. But my advisor, Professor Peng Feng, who is the Dean of the School of Arts at Yenching at Peking University, who's a genius and who's very generous, is taking me to his exhibition opening. So I'm thinking for you that in and through Yenching, perhaps you might be able to meet the person of your artistic, literary, and cultural heroism too. As for my experience as a Yenching scholar, I had the loveliest experience as a Yenching scholar. I'm very lucky that I have been able to be here in person from the start. And because I was sad that others could not, I proposed to Brent and other teachers that we create an exhibition in and about Jingyuan, where the office and classroom of Yenching are, and run it both on-site and online, so that Yenching scholars from all around the world and non-Yenching Peking University teachers and students can all be in this space together. This exhibition came to be called Through Our Door, and making it had been a dream becoming reality. You have to imagine that when I proposed to Brent to do it, it was last year this time. Then I had only been in Yenching for a month or so. So the teachers of Yenching do not really know me, but before they knew me, they already were trusting me and so supporting me. By that, I don't only mean it spiritually, I also mean that materially. They gave us a big budget. Yenching is really rich with resources and is really generous in sharing them, as long as you have a dream and proposal. Of course, it has to be China related. So eventually my team became a team of 33 students, bachelor's and master's and doctor's students from different schools in Peking University, from different universities in China, and from different countries all around the world. As we created our exhibition, we also created a space for us to share our time with each other, ourselves with each other, a friendship with each other, though many of us still have not met in person. Speaking of friendship, Maya, who's also a 2020 Yenching scholar, has been pairing people up for coffee every week, which is such a beautiful idea and powerful action in bringing us close amidst social distancing. So you actually end up making calls and friends with Yenching scholars all over the world. For example, last night I was calling with Elias, who is in Germany, who is rethinking climate justice through Taoist philosophy, and really such a beautiful, fascinating thinker. Penultimately, if I may make suggestions for your consideration of applying to Yenching, I would say think of two things. The first is to think bridge and mirror. Yenching is rich because it is very resourceful and very reputable, and that can take you to many places, many paths around the world and into life. So you can achieve all of this through Yenching, but take it also as a mirror to self-reflect and to introspect. Why is it that I want this here and now? Who am I and who do I want to become? Not only because in order to move your admissions officer, you first have to move yourself, but also because it just is important to know yourself. And this application is a chance to. The second thing to think about is to think about reciprocation. Yenching is very giving and can give you a lot, but what can you give back in return? Because you can always take and take, but then why should others keep giving you? And is there a way of taking that as through giving, a way of growing together? I think if we really want to take, there actually ends up being a lot more to take if we also give and give back. Because to be a scholar at Yenching is not only a transaction, but also a relationship with it and others, not only during our 2 years at Yenching, but also beyond that. into life. Finally, a few words about my exhibition, The Love and Light of My Life at Yenching. Through Our Door is an exhibition in and about Yenching, the century-old garden of serenity. It was built in 1926 by the American architect Henry Murphy as women's dormitories for Yenching University. And when Yenching University became Peking University in 1952, it became the offices for literature, philosophy, history, and law. Since 2014, Jingyuan 3 and 4 have been housing the Yenching Academy, and as such is our home. In content, our exhibition has 3 parts: culture, history, and art, a materialization of the interdisciplinary spirit of both Yenching Academy and Peking University. In form, our exhibition includes interviews with people who have lived, learned, and worked at Jingyuan from the 1960s on, an archive of photographs and texts about Jingyuan from the 1920s to the 1950s, and pieces of architectural fragments such as this dragon head, picked up, I kid you not, in Jingyuan itself. One of my and my team's favorite exhibits of all is this photograph from 1948 of this student and her teacher, her professor, in this classroom. Perhaps a little bit like myself and Brent right now. On the blackboard is written Li Ma Do, Matteo Ricci, the first Jesuit preacher to travel into China. This is a history class of Chinese-Western relations from 73 years ago. It moves me a lot because it makes me think of Yenching Academy, which is the first in China and as such super modern, as actually inheriting tradition, as actually an inheritor of a tradition, as you perhaps also will be. So do take a tour of both Yenching Academy and our exhibition on this link. And yeah, I'll just close by opening up this sort of invitation. Thank you so much for being with me, and I hope to see you in Beijing sometime in a year or two. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Joyce, for submitting that video. Unfortunately, as you know, she can't be here with us live today because she's teaching a graduate course in the School of Art at Peking University. And she's also going with her thesis advisor to a brand new exhibition opening of the world famous Chinese artist Xu Bing later this afternoon. Xu Bing actually came and gave a Topics in China Studies lecture series lecture to Yenching scholars in the autumn of 2019. And it was absolutely outstanding. One of the best lectures I've ever seen.